you need an LLC. It's protecting you. It's keeping your business and your personal life separate. So go to Taylor Brands.
We're now deep into this presidential election cycle, and there have already been dozens, if not hundreds of polls, often broken down to different demographic categories, like young people or Hispanic voters or African Americans. And it is very easy in that context to lose sight of the fact that those polls are representations of the views of millions of people who individually may have wildly different life experiences and views. MSNBC correspondent Tremaine Lee is launching a series called The Race Report, focusing on the intersection of race and politics in the 2020 election. And tonight he has a report for us from South Carolina, where African-American voters make up a majority of the Democratic electorate, and where Joe Biden, who has seen his national support among black voters slip from 49 to 27%, is hoping to reinvigorate his candidacy. Tremaine Lee spoke with a group of South Carolina voters before Iowa and New Hampshire to find out who, if anyone, had their vote.
In Charleston, South Carolina, I met with members of a group who meet up often to talk about family, faith, and politics. Nearly all are black, college educated, and in their early to mid-30s. There are about 30 of them in all, a seemingly homogenous group. But these men and women aren't necessarily on the same page when it comes to the Democratic primary.
There's this idea that black voters and the black voters like a monolith. It's just one big block, and it's Biden. All you hear is Biden, Biden, Biden. But that's not necessarily the case within your friend group, right?
I wouldn't say so.
No.
Yeah, not at all, honestly. Matter of fact, I think I probably hear his name less than a lot of the others.
Which names are you hearing that people are supporting?
So previously it was, Harris.
Kamala, yeah.
You hear Yang a lot.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce it. Is it Buttigieg?
Buttigieg.
Yeah, you hear his name every now and again, and then Bernie.
This is 2020. Where are we headed? It's not the same world. Globalization, pending war, impeachment. There are other things we have to take into consideration. And I'm not sure that a Bernie Sanders, who is as old as my mom, or Elizabeth Warren, or a Joe Biden, are the people that are going to take me into the next country that I want to live in.
What issues are important for you, and what do you hope your candidate of choice will speak on?
The issues that are really important to me, one are women's issues and mental health, particularly mental health because that's the field that I'm in.
I want to talk about student loans. I want to talk about healthcare. I want to talk about the future of the environment and that there will be a world here when my daughter grows up.
All of the top-tier candidates are trying to sway voters like these folks. They're visiting historically black colleges and universities, joining black congregants for Sunday church services, and spending millions for ads on black radio.
Why do you think we're so stuck on that idea that there is just the black vote? Because when you talk about other groups, there's the Midwestern vote and working class vote and the single mother vote, but you always hear it's just the black vote. Why is that?
Because we haven't had the privilege or luxury, if you will, of being able to be as segmented. We almost have always had to kind of collectively put together our vote to make a real difference.
A lot of people, they don't look at African Americans as people who are politically astute. I don't think they realize how politically involved African Americans are, how interested in politics we are, especially as the times change. We're getting more and more active. Younger people are coming up. So I think it's changing, and I don't think people have accepted that change yet.
And joining me now from Nevada, which along with South Carolina will be holding the next two Democratic contests, Tremaine Lee. Tremaine, that last point I thought was a really interesting one because there's a sort of idea.
Shalom, this is a big back with another edification. I want to thank all 213 of my subscribers. I want to wish that all of my subscribers are in high spirits. And I want to wish that all of my subscribers, you and your loved ones, are safe and protected against these agendas that are waged against us here behind enemy lines here in America. Today I want to discuss the so-called black male and female voter, the so-called black race is pretty much doing what this verse says here, Lamentations 4:17. All right, and I'm gonna start at 16. It says, the anger of Yahweh the power have divided them. He will no more regard them. They respected not the persons of the priest. They favored not the elders. All right. 17, this is the point. As for us, our eyes as yet failed for our vain help in our watching. We have watched for a nation that could not save us. And I played that clip of the so-called African American voters because I want to show how divided the so-called blacks are because of their values, the difference, the different views on culture. And it was evident during that little interview where the so-called black females were more concerned with females and females having the vote and the future of the female and the future of the daughters, okay? She has a separate outlook and a separate perspective and a separate culture and a separate set of values that are against the unifying of a natural family with the husband and the wife, right? And it just goes to show how the females here behind enemy lines here in America, they focus on females as if the female is the carrier of the race, or if the female is being favored over the men by either the creator or by the so-called white race, right? Politics, right? The so-called black female, she thinks she prefers a separate vote. She doesn't vote for family. She doesn't petition the American government for some type of family incentive. Okay, over here in America behind enemy lines, the so-called black female, she has a separate agenda. And she plays favoritism as far as white America gets her undivided attention. Since Trump has applied his tariffs and sent ICE to these cities here in America to deport non-whites, right? I have not, and these evictions, so-called black female is being evicted left and right, all right? She's losing her employment, okay? And she's also wicked. She's still wicked against the so-called black man, children, family, structure, the family values. There's no turning back for her. But I thought it was interesting to still hear how these so-called blacks continue to make deals with political America. The Democrats historically approached African Americans right after the Emancipation Proclamation. Once slavery was abolished, or chattel slavery rather was abolished, the Democrats approached the so-called blacks and mentioned to the blacks that the Democrats would be the dog in the political race of America to represent so-called black Americans. And so-called blacks, since chattel slavery was abolished, have been with the Democrats, assuming the Democrats were the dog in the political race for the so-called blacks to gain rights and benefits from the American government, the so-called whites. Here it is, 2025, and in order for any type of major change, as far as a righteous change, in order for a righteous change to happen, the so-called black female has to be canceled, the political movement has to be canceled, the religious movement has to be canceled with the Christianity and the Jesus stuff. That has to be canceled. The so-called black female has to be canceled as far as being independent. She shouldn't be allowed to continue to give birth to these children when they can't afford to be a single mother. So this separate vote, the separate agenda that this so-called black female poses, she has a separate value system where she doesn't value family, and she doesn't go after any type of incentives for men, women, and children as a collective. She's more concerned with the daughters, the females, the women. The women having a separate incentive, a separate care package from the men. It's one thing for single motherhood to be a thing, but to be the head of a household as a single mother, that's where it's become too normal for these females to have these children and run off with these children after they've broken up families left and right. It's too normal. The children don't even realize it's unnatural for this female to take the children after breaking up a family. Because if men did it, if men just got women pregnant the way women get pregnant and run off with children, why can't the man do it? Why is it a double standard for the females to do it? And they call it a family. So again, like verse 17 says, as for us, our eyes as yet failed for our vain help. In our watching, we have watched for a nation that could not save us. Anyone watching, go look at the Democrats approaching the so-called black race after chattel slavery was abolished. Democrats have been pretending to be a dog in the political race of America for so-called African Americans since the abolishment of chattel slavery. And Trump, being a Republican, he blames the Democrats for the debt that so-called blacks create from being on programs and stuff like that. So that is the works of the Democrats. That's why they say, oh, we got the black vote. The black vote. Yeah, the Democrats are the so-called blacks' dog in the political race. And these so-called blacks, one reason why I don't really deal with so-called blacks, and I'm a Judite, but my thing is the females control the so-called black race. The females are the face of the so-called black race here in America, and the men have not canceled the so-called black female from posing as the head of the race. She gets pregnant, she walks away with the children, and the men are supposed to, allow themselves to be groomed and conditioned to accept the unnatural situation with children and females. If America's saying that these females can get pregnant and run off with children, then there's no such thing as these, a deadbeat man or something like that. These females are all over the internet playing politics, voicing their opinions that are adverse and separate to the men and the children. So that's all I got. I just wanted to point that out real quick, that the so-called black community doesn't stand a chance because you have these values of the males and the females that are pagan. They're not according to the law, statutes, and commandments of the Bible. So their voting is a sin. You know, hanging out with the Edomites when there's no place of repentance for Esau, right? Looking to a nation that can't save y'all. It's just the same thing, man. The so-called female, the so-called black female is still the problem. And the so-called black community doesn't want to address this so-called black female and cancel her. And cancel this political movement. Voting for future slaves. How are you going to do that? How are you going to vote when you're supposed to vote to appoint a king over yourselves as so-called blacks? You're supposed to vote in a king from the tribes of Israel. Not supposed to be voting for slave masters, thinking there's a lesser devil, man. If Kamala would have won, she would have had so-called black women in debt with housing. She's giving them $20,000 checks for like $1 million houses, which they'll never pay off. They'll just be in debt. Every time I listen to these so-called blacks, their women are against family and fatherhood and husbandry, unless these husbands are tricks and suckers and simps and fools that want to sponsor a lifestyle for these lazy, unfit females that'll run off with your child, or that will openly target a man's finances, that'll openly railroad him from being a husband and a father, man. These so-called black females here in America are the problem. It starts with their values and how irresponsible they are when it comes to having a family. They call single motherhood family now. Just a woman with children running off with men's children, breaking up families. So men can do it too. If men ran around and said, I'm gonna get her pregnant and I don't give a damn about them children, she wanna be a single mother any damn way, so it don't matter if I get these broads pregnant, I'll just pump them up with kids and keep on moving. And then the females are walking around as if they're the mothers of all races. When women cannot get other women pregnant, and to be a mother of all races, when you're not the carrier of the seed, that means you have to be a whore and let men of other races impregnate you with the seeds of other races in order to be the mother of all races. These other races have their own women of their own race. In the beginning of the Bible, there was other races outside the garden. Where do you think Cain got his wife from? So, this is America spreading lies, and the so-called black female, she's a part of these lies as well. She's not the mother of all races. I disagree with that. They don't carry the seed. How are they the mother of all races? I can understand a father of all races because he's a seed carrier, but there's no historical evidence that one man created all these races or one woman is the mother of all these races. That's not true. So with that said, I want to say Shalom. This has been a beat with another edification. Hopefully somebody's been edified. I want to make this short. I want to wish all of my subscribers high health and high spirits, and I want to wish all of my subscribers, you and your loved ones, are safe and protected against these agendas that are waged against us here behind enemy lines here in America. Shalom.